I mean, the joint declaration was a result of secret negotiations between Britain and China, in which we, the 6 million Hong Kong people, play no part.
The one country, two system is suggested by Chinese government. It's not gained by us. They suggest the one country, two system because they know very clear Hong Kong is different. We should maintain Hong Kong system. Actually, it's a British system. They know very clear. I mean, the higher level, the leader in Beijing, know very clear. That's why they suggest a one country system, and they know it's totally different. They cannot replace it. That's the Hong Kong's value.
You think if it is really one country, two system, it means that Hong Kong people rule in Hong Kong. Hong Kong people should elect Hong Kong people to be legislator, to be the governor or the chief executive.
As for the British government, I think the way they've handled Hong Kong has been quite disgraceful. There are over 6 million people in Hong Kong, and 3.5 million are British citizens, but they are third-class citizens because they have no right to live in the United Kingdom. They have been abandoned by Britain. And then I was a journalist at that time already, working for the Far Eastern Economic Review. Maggie Thatcher traveled to Peking to sign the agreement with Zhao Ziyang, who is now, of course, been displaced. And it was on the 19th of December, 1984, that they signed the joint declaration. And then 2 days later, they came to Hong Kong, and she held a press conference. I popped the following question to her. I said, Prime Minister, 2 days ago, you signed an agreement with China, promising to deliver over 5 million people into the hands of a communist dictatorship. Is that morally defensible? Or is it really true that in international politics, the highest form of morality is one's own national interest?
Can I just say this to you? What do you think would have happened if we had not attempted to get an agreement? I think you would have had a great cause to complain had the government of Great Britain done nothing until 1997. And I believe that most of the people, indeed the overwhelming number of people in Hong Kong, think the same. You may be the solitary exception.
Oh my God.
For those of you who remember George Orwell in 1984,
Right.
solitary exception is the definition for insanity.
In that year, it would have its own government composed of Hong Kong people. No Chinese officials would be posted to Hong Kong to work in the government. Hong Kong would have an elected legislature and pass its own laws. It would have an independent judiciary. Hong Kong people would keep their existing rights and freedoms, rights of property, assembly, free speech, worship, etc. The International Human Rights Covenant would also continue to apply. In short, Hong Kong would continue with its way of life without interference from the Chinese government, which would be responsible only for foreign affairs and defense.
Indeed, such guarantees ought to remain for 50 years. In spite of that, public opinion polls have shown that most people in Hong Kong are apprehensive of the future.
Obviously, because of Chinese government's track record.
I think many Hong Kong people are very scared of the Chinese Communist Party. This is, of course, not the fear of the unknown, because about half of the population here actually fled from Communist China, and the other half, people like myself, are children of such refugees.
As far as I think, the one country, two system model is a fable. Let's make some examples in history. In 1949, when the communists conquered Shanghai, some business people and landlords was wondering whether should they leave Shanghai and go to Taiwan. The Communist Party said, "Don't worry, nothing will change. You will still be doing business. You will still be rich. You will still own your assets just as the same as before. But only 1 year after that, in 1950, they killed most of the landlords, and they have all the business firms and major enterprises just force the owners give this to the government, or also to the government at very low price. In 1957, when the Chinese government said, okay, we have some problem in this system, and we would like people suggest what should we do. Mao Zedong said, whoever gave us suggestion is our friend, and nobody should worry about of saying this. Then a lot of people say, give suggestions, and everybody of them were put into jail or killed after that.
My biggest concern on Hong Kong's future is there is no guarantee on the eventuality of Hong Kong. The three pieces of documents that Hong Kong relies on its futures, i.e. the Basic Law, the joint Sino-British Declaration, and the Memorandum of Understanding between John Marshall and Jiang Zemin. Those three documents are international documents between two sovereign countries. Okay, once Hong Kong reverts back to China, all matters involving China becomes a domestic matter. And once it's a domestic matter, it is not subject to international scrutiny or intervention. And as such, okay, there is therefore basically no guarantee on what will happen in Hong Kong vis-a-vis human rights, vis-a-vis a high degree of autonomy, vis-a-vis the rule of law, or for that matter, anything else. And that is the biggest concern, is that there is no guarantee.
As for freedom of speech, we must be very careful not to give the government or the leadership an excuse to do anything. At the same time, we soon cause ourselves to be afraid and wondering what we can or cannot say.
將來我會講説話小心啲，即係唔會話好似人哋講咩你要跟埋人哋講啲乜嘢咁樣，我唔會嘅，即係我唔會。
And what is behind it that make people so fearful is the fact that they settle accounts with their enemies. And this is the thing that strikes fear in the hearts of Chinese people all over the world, because the Chinese Communist government has a very long memory. It remembers things that its enemies do and say. And it also keeps records of all these things. And then when the time comes, whether it's years, decades down the road, they can still drag you out and take out those records and say, oh, you said such and such, you did such and such on such a date, and now you may be sent to prison for 20 years, or you may be shot, or whatever. And even your families, your relatives may be implicated. And this is dreadful. People are very, very fearful. And they know if that should happen to them in future here, nobody will be able to rescue them.
Yes, I think that people should keep in mind what happened in the past, but they should also be looking at what is happening in the present, so that one should not think that a country like China, for instance, never changes. I think it's quite clear that China has changed and is continuing to change.
Indeed, China changed in 1984.
當時鄧小平亦都啱啱上台，中國咧進行呢個經濟上嘅改革，係同以前有好多嘅唔同。咁當時大家都抱有好大嘅希望。
The slogan by Deng Xiaoping that the racehorse will continue to run, dancing continues still, was an attempt to reassure the people of Hong Kong that their lifestyle will not change.
Now, I think people should also judge Hong Kong by the present and not just by the past. A lot of people who were in Hong Kong in the 50s, 60s, maybe even the 70s would say, well, Hong Kong people only care about money. A lot of people who came to Hong Kong to study Chinese, for instance, say, when I was in Hong Kong, nobody talked about democracy. Nobody was interested. Well, I think that was not really true in those days, and it is even less true today. It's really a question of demographics, because up until the 1970s, most people in Hong Kong were born in China. They were from China. See, the population of Hong Kong went from 600,000 at the end of the Second World War to something like 2.5 million within a few years, because a couple of million people came from China after the Civil War. So those people were not Hong Kong people. They didn't think of themselves as Hong Kong people. And naturally, they weren't going to talk about democracy or having elections in Hong Kong. They thought of themselves as being from Shanghai or other parts of China. And it's only their children who were born in Hong Kong after the border between China and Hong Kong was closed, who grew up thinking of themselves as Hong Kong people. And those children are people who started to mature beginning in the 70s. So that even if there were not this 1997 factor, people in Hong Kong would increasingly be asking for a voice in the running of the government for democracy.
Then came the pro-democracy movement in China in the spring of 1989.
89年嘅民運可以話俾香港人一次喺民主上邊、喺民族意識上面一個洗禮。當時好多次嘅大遊行活動咧，都超過100萬人參加，即係話香港1/6嘅人喺街上邊嚟示威，表示支持呢個北京嘅活動。咁從呢點睇到當時人嘅投入，同時希望啊，中國政府能夠接納學生呢啲要求咧，使到中國唔單止喺經濟上邊有開放改革，同時喺政治上咧同時有所進步。假如中國有所進步，中國有一啲民主嘅時候咧，將來香港啊保持不變咧，就會更加有保障。咁但係結果呢個咁嘅愛國民主運動受到鎮壓，所以香港人非常之震驚。
Shortly afterward, Shuqi directed a documentary on the impact of those events in China on the people of Hong Kong. The film Sunless Days went on to win international recognition.
The reason why I made the movie was that it was almost like the shock of my life when I saw what happened on television and when I learned what happened in Beijing, and I think it's also a very important event and also a very important period for almost like any Chinese around the world, especially the Chinese in China and in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong I think we were following the events almost like day by day for over a period of 2 months, and it was like something would happen just around you, because you saw what happened on television every day. You learned about the events. You learned about. I mean, you. It's like, I mean, every student leader became almost like a member of your household. So it's really very, very intimate, and when it turned out to be, you know, that's why what took place on June the 4th is kind of a shock, because suddenly what happened in Beijing has been so close, and then suddenly you realize that it was so distant. You realize that, you know, it was something that is totally out of your control. I think it is that kind of shock which really made an impression or marked a significance in your life.
then of course you start to think a lot about your own identity, about your own country, about your own life, about your own future, as well as the future of Hong Kong. I mean, everything became, together. I mean, it's part of a whole big issue, part of a whole big question.
Point. And the Chinese, when they speak of human rights, like to focus on economic human rights. And when the United States speaks of the Chinese situation, they like to focus on civil and political human rights. Now,
咁東方嘅人唔係人呢？點解東方嘅人唔可以享到自由呢？點解一定要西方人先享受到自由呢？咁係咪自己低貶咗自己呢？咁樣，譬如我哋一個人，我哋嘅口除咗食飯之外，我哋仲要講説話㗎嘛？只係準食飯，唔準講説話，咁人嘅意思呢就會降低啦。我哋知道禽獸都要食飽，只係俾人食飽呢，並唔係一種人權嚟嘅。
Even as many people tried to put the 1989 Beijing Tiananmen massacre behind them, a number of events have since occurred in China that have rekindled the apprehension and fear.
I think it is obvious that Wei Jingsheng has suffered a gross injustice under the CCP totalitarian government. Wei is only exercising his rights to the freedom of speech and freedom of thought. But he is being sentenced for 14 years just for exercising these rights.
Well, I feel worried about my future also, because people can be put in jail for whatever reasons the Chinese government thought. So now we have to do our own right.
This time, Aung being put in jail is not fair. So we have to stand up here to voice out our feeling and our ideas. So I came out, but I think we have to voice out and not sitting here silently.
I think some people may be afraid, yeah, but I think we shouldn't be afraid, because I think we should, all Chinese should together will overcome everything. Yes.
Well, because I feel I'm a free man, and I will not be free until other people they are arrested by innocent talks, you know. So for me, it's one way to support Mr. Wei, because he's not a criminal, he's not a violent person. He's someone.
Perhaps the most troubling aspect of human rights in Hong Kong is press freedom.
The role of media in societies is different, and we may feel very passionately about how we view media's role in society, and we may get frustrated when other people don't share our passion in that area, but that is the reality that we deal with.
Press freedom is also respected or honored in the Chinese constitution.
I think I'm most worried about freedom of speech as well as freedom of press, because the press is extremely important, but I think we have begun to start feeling about the newspapers censoring themselves, and they are worried to talk completely openly because there are already pressures from China.
The self-censor is self. Who gives the pressure? What's the pressure?
I mean, the pressure the reporter facing is, you can say, immense. Or the Chinese leader have setting some parameter for the press freedom in the future. As far as I remember, the Vice Premier, Mr. Chen Chi-chen, and also the Director of Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of China have saying that reporter should, they can report freely because Hong Kong has press freedom. But there is something that they cannot report, they cannot advocate. For example, the independency of Taiwan, independency of Hong Kong, and independency of Tibet. They cannot advocate this kind of force. And at that time, then I will ask, what is the line between advocate and reporting? For example, I report several times for, some people saying that they would like Hong Kong or Taiwan or Tibet to be independent. Is that I'm advocating? If so, is that I should be, in jail? This kind of philosophy or taboo setting for Hong Kong press is very dangerous, and it is not the way of press freedom should be regarded. If you are saying that if you respect press freedom, then you should, and the press can report everything except this information is knowingly false, then you should not report. As far as a report is reporting on the basis of fair, accurate, and objectively, I don't see that why we cannot report some people saying that Hong Kong or Tibet or Taiwan should be independent. And I remember in early 1980s, there's actually some people advocating that Hong Kong should be independent when the future of Hong Kong was discussing by Sino-British government. But then this idea was fully discussed through the media, and the idea was died down laterally, and Hong Kong still prosperous. I remember Mr. Chen Qichen, the Vice Premier of China, saying that you can criticize Chinese leader, but you cannot make personal attack on them. Then I will ask him, what is the line between criticism and personal attack? It is very hard to distinguish, and this kind of words will pose potential danger to Hong Kong reporter. It causes psychological effect or psychological pressure on the media of Hong Kong.
越接近97年嘅7月1號呢，香港嘅新聞界啊係越嚟越自論啦，包括咗電台、電視同埋報紙，佢哋報導民主黨嘅新聞係越嚟越少，而對中國嘅批評呢，亦都越嚟越少。好多啊係比較敢言嘅專欄作家，佢哋喺好多報紙嘅專欄呢都被取消。
According to a survey conducted by the Hong Kong Journalists Association in early 1995, 1/3 respondents admitted that they have exercised self-censorship, and even around 90% believe that there is self-censorship in the industry. Although the clandestine nature of self-censorship that we cannot pin down, actual cases, but we know that the situation, if not getting worse, then it hasn't got better.
That is, people should not engage in self-censorship for fear of future reprisals. But of course, they do this because it is generally believed that the Chinese government keeps dossiers on journalists, reporters, and editors. And so there is fear that there will be reprisals after 1997.
Indeed, such fears are reported in the 1996 annual report of the Hong Kong Journalists Association, which says, in particular, the fear in Hong Kong that by expressing political views which may be antagonistic to China might result in some form of punishment or sanction to the offender, and to actions which clearly have more threatening undertones, such as blacklisting.
People practice self-censorship is again because of fear, and in this case also because of possible financial loss. Because if news organizations, whether it's TV, radio, or newspapers or magazines, if they publish stories which China does not like, China could punish them by very simply just withdrawing the advertising. Because now we know there are many Chinese companies in Hong Kong, and they pay a lot of advertising money. So they can use that to punish organizations which do not do what they are told.
we learned that the Chinese government or the Chinese officials in Hong Kong always invites the owners of different media to lunch or to dinner, and then tell them what will the Chinese government like Hong Kong media to do or to consider. And the owner, they will consider if they want to maintain their existence in Hong Kong after the handover, then they will think what reports might antagonize the Chinese government and which will jeopardize their existence after the handover. So when they have this kind of thought, then the middle management will guess or sometimes even get direct instruction from the boss to ban some reports appear on the newspaper. So that's why some vocal voice was diminishing recently. And as the reporter, of course, they try to report different views of the society. But when you find that once you write a story of certain group of people, then it was throw it to the rubbish bin or even put at the bottom of the newspaper. Then you still try again the second time, the third time, the fourth time, and then how about the fifth time? Do you still doing this kind of work? Do you still, interviewing those people you thought or you experienced that their voice will not be heard, even you interviewing them?
What I'm worrying about is will the pro-Chinese businessmen they buy the newspapers companies or mass media company or TV or radio. In such a case, they make policies, and these businessmen are Hong Kong people, and so that actually it's not self-censored. It's media's policies, or they don't like, they do not want to see very much critical point which against the China or against Chinese policies. I did talk with some of the senior reporters. They said they will leave the job after July this year because they are worrying about their lack of freedom of speech. Their boss doesn't like them to writing many critical points on current issues. I said no. The point is, when the people they stand for freedom of speech, freedom of press, leave the press, then who can do it? And who can show whether the government policies are really, how to say them, by mean or by hope, to limit the scope of freedom of speech? At least we have to have some people really doing it, and they do not allow you to do it. Then you show it is the government policies. If no one do it, actually there won't be any lack of freedom of speech. There will be no demonstration of lack of freedom of speech.
I must say that the Hong Kong Journalists Association has been extremely courageous in championing freedom of the press and in bringing about the release of Xi Yang, for instance. They had, over the years, presented many petitions to the Chinese government, and their members had signed their names to these petitions and put down their identity card numbers and so forth. So
Xi Yang was the reporter of Ming Pao, a local newspaper in Hong Kong. He was detained in Beijing in 27th of September of 1993 and was formally arrested in October of the same year, and then was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment of stealing of state secrets. But as we have said, he just doing what a reporter do in other part of the world, that is making some scoop news story. We didn't think that he's stealing the state secrets, and actually what he report has been appear on the newspaper in Hong Kong previously. I mean, before he published his news. So we didn't think and we didn't agree that he is doing some work that is beyond the responsibility of a reporter. He was released recently in early 1997.
And not just Hong Kong. I think the entire world was stunned that a journalist could get 12 years sentence for just writing some financial news.
And the incident happened in Beijing. Even ourselves, we don't agree what Chinese have done on him. But because that's Beijing, it's not Hong Kong, we can only sound our feeling. We say no, we don't agree with the government's behaviors. It doesn't mean such thing will definitely happen in Hong Kong, because it's different system. When you walk in another system, even though you don't agree with that law, still you should follow, is it?
In spite of the fact that we're happy now that he's come back, but we're still concerned that similar things could happen to our journalists in future. And I think the problem is, because now that we're going to be part of China, obviously information about China is very important to the Hong Kong people. So many news organizations would like to send journalists to China to do stories. And then the Chinese, of course, say, oh, well, when you are in China, you have to follow Chinese laws. And the trouble is, we don't even know what those laws are.
However, there is proof that management or media company owners have been doing this. And it is my impression that to them, the media company is simply another money-making vehicle. And they're not really interested in general concepts like freedom of the press. There are several examples in Hong Kong. For instance, some years ago, Rupert Murdoch sold the South China Morning Post, and subsequently he said at a press conference that he had done this because he wanted to do business of China, and the Morning Post, because of its critical editorial stance, had become a liability, so he got rid of it. And similarly, he controlled Star TV, and Star TV carried BBC News. Now, several years ago, you may remember, BBC News came out of a documentary on Chairman Mao. And part of that documentary had to do with Chairman Mao's sex life. And the Chinese were very unhappy over the BBC. And Rupert Murdoch, knowing this, dropped BBC News from Star TV. And again, he acknowledged subsequently that this was because he didn't want to antagonize the Chinese and he wanted to do business with them.
香港嘅人權自由受到限制呢，第一個就反映喺新聞自由方面。假如新聞自由係受到限制嘅話呢，咁香港發生嘅事幹喺其他地方呢就唔容易知道。咁同時冇咗新聞嘅監督呢，中國同埋特區政府亦都可以為所欲為，民意唔能夠被反映出嚟。跟住呢，就會其他方面嘅限制呢，亦都會出現㗎啦。
The best scenario from a businessman's point of view is that China will let Hong Kong function as Hong Kong has functioned for the last 150 years, or certainly for the last 50 years. And that is the best scenario, okay? But that is not a probable scenario. If you look at the major companies, public companies, structures, okay, you will also see major companies transforming into China-related or Chinese ownership, Chinese vis-a-vis Chinese government ownership-related enterprises. Cathay Pacific is, Hong Kong Telecommerce. Once these Chinese components, Chinese government components get into a company, they tend to have more than an economic agenda. They tend to want to move a company in a certain direction for a certain purpose. Okay. Prior to that, Hong Kong works on 100% business basis. Okay, if it makes money, it's good. If it loses money, it's bad. Okay, nowadays, okay, well, if it makes money, it must also satisfy a set of other criteria before the deal can become a good deal. And Hong Kong people or Hong Kong business circle has to learn to live with the new reality, and I am not sure if all Hong Kong businessmen can accept that or can do well in that kind of an environment.
I think what has happened to the Nix Media Holdings, owned by Mr. Jimmy Lai, is a case in point of showing how your business can suffer if you do not toe the line or if you dare to criticize the Chinese leadership. And then, of course, he created the Apple Daily. And I think the Apple Daily is probably one of the most independent newspapers in Hong Kong. The Apple Daily is independent in a sense that it still would publish things that may upset China and would still publish some stories on the pro-democracy lobby. But what the Chinese government has been doing is trying to ostracize that paper and the whole group, actually, owned by Mr. Jimmy Lai. So that's why recently, when Mr. Lai tried to float the group in the stock market to launch a public listing, the financial company, which was supposed to be helping it, Mr. Sun Hung Kai, suddenly said, sorry, I'm getting out because of you know what.
I think most business people feel that it would be far preferable for Next magazine to find an underwriter and be floated, and that type of potential political interference is undesirable. I think as a free economy, and Hong Kong is a free economy, we in business would be happier to see the services and underwriting services available to any qualified company that wants to float on the stock market. Let's let the market decide whether this is a desirable or undesirable investment.
I mean, most of the issues which concern business people are exactly the same issues which concern the men and women on the streets. There are some different ones, but many of the issues are the same. The issues of corruption, the issues of the rule of law. Is the law going to be applied in a fair and even way, in a transparent way, as it has been before?
When you try to sell to someone, obviously their opinions and their reactions to situations are important to you. And if therein hinges a sale, you're going to at least listen to what the other side is saying. If there's something they're very unhappy about, you listen to it. Now, that has happened in other times. It's happened with most favored nation requirements with China, in which certain companies, Boeing leaps to mind, was put under pressure because of a political situation with MFN, over which, frankly, Boeing had very little specific control over it.
That possibly the greatest risk to the smooth workings of the one country, two systems concept is less likely to be intervention from senior level officials in Beijing than groups in Hong Kong who may, for various reasons of private interest, not just business groups, but I think business groups have been singled out as particularly susceptible to this temptation, who may seek somehow to influence things to their advantage by trying to bring Beijing officials into the decision-making process. That clearly is something that needs to be resisted by business organizations, and to make sure that the Chinese officials who are approached in that respect don't succumb to the temptation to try to interfere.
I think the freedom of information is a very important instrument for a free market. Actually, what we mean free market is all the information should be provided to everybody. And if the information, when a person gets the information should be the same as the others.
Is what the implications of the Xi'an case are, and the whole question of the free flow of information, and the question of the effectiveness, particularly of Chinese language media, here in Hong Kong in reporting on what is going on in the People's Republic of China. This has been a very, very important component of providing understanding to us on what is going on in China. And I think those of us who do business there would be concerned to see that very valuable input by Chinese journalists, in Hong Kong Chinese journalists, limited in some way because of the Xi'an case.
It seems to me very clear that every business has a responsibility within its sphere of influence, within its own sphere of activity, to make sure that it is behaving by appropriate international standards, that it's not condoning abuses of those standards amongst its partners and amongst those organizations that it works with. I mean, it seems to me that no individual business is in a position to take on the Chinese government single-handedly on the issue of human rights.
And maybe some people will say, isn't it too much to ask business people to also care about human rights to the extent of sacrificing their business just because they want to champion human rights? Do you think their shareholders would understand it? I think these are very tough questions. But then, if we look at the issue of human rights and democracy and ask ourselves, what are they about? And we understand and we know that these are the pillars of Western civilization. And if we abandon these pillars, what else have we got left?
In the winter of 1995, Sita Wang, a legislator, gave an interview during which he made the following predictions.
咁將來香港會點樣發展呢？咁樣，我覺得中國會進行幾種嘅干預，香港會喺幾方面咧進行倒退嘅。首先呢，佢係會修改香港嘅選舉法，係用一種新嘅選舉方法嚟限制我哋民主派嘅人當選嘅機會，使到佢能夠控制呢個立法局。咁第二個我相信呢，就係新聞自由嘅限制，佢係通過種種嘅方法嚟影響香港嘅新聞自由嘅。第三方面呢，我相信司法制度亦都好難保持得呢個獨立公正。第四方面呢，我相信貪污腐敗都必定會侵蝕香港。咁跟住呢，我相信佢會限制我哋嘅群眾活動啦，就係限制遊行、集會、示威呢啲嘅活動。
They already set up a provisional legislatures in December 1996. The provisional legislatures consisting of 60 members, they are selected, so-called selected, by a selection committee. A selection committee is appointed by the preparatory committee, and the preparatory committee also appointed by the Beijing government.
And human rights laws are being amended, for the worse, of course. It will be in relation to, they will restrict press freedom, for example, and the right of the freedom of assembly and the freedom of public demonstrations.
They are going to set up the repressive law, reenactment, and also will enact some of the laws on subversion, treason, secession, the theft of state secrets.
What is subversion? Well, recently a Chinese dissident Wang Dan was given 11 years for writing an article in a Hong Kong newspaper which wasn't even circulated in China, in which he said, in China there is no press freedom. Well, there's something known to everyone. If it hadn't been an article from Wang Dan, I don't think that Ming Ma would have published it. It's nothing new. But they published it, and the Chinese court agreed with Wang Dan that there is no press freedom in China, and so gave him 11 years for saying that.
Will Hong Kong be a conduit for China's future? Or will Hong Kong slip into history after July 1st, 1997?
中國百幾年嚟俾帝國主義蝦，呢個係事實。但係呢幾十年、呢40幾年以嚟，已經冇呢種現象出現啦。咁同時我哋唔願意俾外國人蝦我哋。 但係我哋更加唔願意咧，係俾我哋自己中國人蝦我哋中國人嘅喎。
因為一路我哋都有睇啲新聞咧，即係會見到啲人，就算你搞到點樣民運啊，點乜都冇乜用咁，好似即係搞出嚟好似冇乜用。中國嗰啲都唔會照你嘅意思去做，考慮都好似我諗都唔使考慮，佢會照翻自己國家點樣去做。
Main immediate concern is the self-censorship. I think if people aren't willing to actually say what they think, if they start adapting to life on the assumption that they're going to live in a dictatorship, well then they certainly will end up living in a dictatorship.
We shouldn't have an assumption China will surely do something bad to Hong Kong. Also, we shouldn't with the assumption China will certainly try to please Hong Kong people. We should stick on our point, stick on our system, work as usual. The common issue, first of all, is not believe in Beijing government or not. First of all, believe in yourself or not. It is time for Hong Kong people to show off their guts. What the definition of guts? Not only the case in say no to Beijing. You show up your guts. Maybe more important to stand up, to work as usual.
We want them to know about this very compelling story in Hong Kong, whereas all over the world we see people breaking out, emerging from the shackles of communism. But here it's just the reverse. 6 million people are going to be delivered to communist rule, lock, stock and barrel, with no choice. And what we want is for people to send a message to Peking, tell Peking to leave us alone, cool it. The Hong Kong people don't want to subvert the Chinese government. We just want them to leave us alone. Let us have democratic elections. China will be responsible for our foreign affairs and defense, and we, being left alone, will prosper.